Using that moment in history as a metaphor, as the world has come to this present moment in time, now comes the beginning of spiritual insights and revelations for the cracking of the Luciferian code. But I want to kind of draw a picture for you here in helping us come to grips with the difficulty of what we're dealing with. Try to imagine, this may sound a little bit silly, but try to imagine the relationship of an ant to a human. Do you really think that an ant understands the existence of a human? They're so small, they have so little intelligence. Maybe if you're messing up their anthill, they'd recognize there was danger, but do you really think they conceptualize the existence of a human? I don't think so. Humans not only are thousands of times larger than an ant, maybe millions of times larger than an ant, they're far more intelligent, far more complex than an ant. So the ability for an ant to wrap his mind around a human is like, it's impossible. Well, it's almost the same type of paradigm that we can paint in the relationship of a human being to an archangel. Archangels their intelligence is so vast, they are so brilliant and intelligent in so many ways, so far beyond human ability to understand that it's very much like comparing an ant to a human. That being said, one of the things that we have to do in beginning to understand this whole dimension, and especially the Luciferian codes, is to come to grips with our limitations, because we have tremendous limitations in being able to wrap our mind around something this enormous. And so what we have to do to expand our consciousness and our spirituality is come to grips with something inside each one of us, which we call the vanishing point. Every human being has a vanishing point. And what we mean by that is that we have limitations on how far and how much and how able we are to see in the present, the future, and into the past. Every one of those directions has limitations. Those limitations are based upon the degree of light that each one of us possesses within ourselves. It says in the scriptures that Christ is the light that lighteth every man, that lights every man that comes into the world. That means that Christ is in every man. But that Christing is really spiritual light. And that spiritual light is given in different degrees to each person. It's not all the same. Some people are born with more light than others. Some people are born into this world with the capacity to see farther than other people. But everybody is born with a level of light. Now that light can be dampened down depending upon the foundation that is being built in us by our parents and our surrounding, or by the negativity of a lack of parents. It can be diminished by not understanding the whole issue of transgressing of the laws. And that's the common word for that is sinning. It's basically just not understanding the light that's in us. And as we violate that light, we move farther into darkness. And that's why we find that there are certain things that are said that indicate the light we work with could be darkness. And how great that darkness is if we think the darkness we're functioning in is light. And a lot of people function in darkness, and that's the light they use. And it's a terrible misapprehension of what really is the intention of God, which is to bring us to more capacity for light. So what we want to do, what we're trying to do in this presentation is stretch your capacity so that you can have more light. We want you to come into the light, have greater inward eyes to see farther out. And so in order to do this, we have to deal with this issue of the vanishing point. Now, I want to try to illustrate this to help you see that you have these limitations which you don't realize as limitations. A thing happened to me the other day when I was trying to catch up with my wife. She had gone to her daughter-in-law's house to take care of our new grandson, and I had to talk to her about an issue in our business. And so I went out looking for her, and I thought that she was at my daughter-in-law's house. And I drove all the way out there because I needed her approval. We agree on a lot of things, and I needed her approval on something I was writing, and I knew she was caught up with the baby, so I went out there. When I got there, she wasn't there. But my daughter-in-law was there. And I said to her, where is my wife? And she said, well, she went to her mother's house. So I went, okay. So I got back in my car and I drove all the way over to my mother-in-law's house. And I got to the front door and my mother-in-law said, well, Jan was just here and she just left. Jan's my wife. And I went, great. I've just wasted a half hour driving all over town looking for my wife. I drove all the way home and there she was. She was at the very place I started from. And I thought about that. I thought, if I had used my cell phone and tried to reach her before she had gone to my daughter-in-law's house, or while she was at my daughter-in-law's house, I wouldn't have spun my wheels. I would have just caught up with her. Now, people make those kinds of mistakes all the time, every day. And the reason for that mistake is we have a lack of information. If I had had the information, I wouldn't have made those miscalculations. And human beings constantly, in their logic, make miscalculations. And the reason for it is because they just don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. If they did, they wouldn't have that kind of subjective confusion going on. All of us make those kinds of mistakes all the time, which goes to the fact that we're living in a subjective state, because if we had all the facts all the time, we would make perfect decisions. But the fact of the matter is that we don't, because we just don't have all the pieces to the puzzle about whatever issue we're dealing with. So we have a vanishing point in our logic. And if you could come to grips with that, then you wouldn't be so quick to judge other people, because there's no way a human being can judge another human being. And so in like manner, we have the same problem with making decisions and calculations simply because we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. I hope you understand that all I'm trying to point out here is we have certain limitations in the way we use logic and the way we figure out problems. We often don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. Here's another one. Suppose you were part of a jury in, let's say, the O.J. Simpson case. And a lot of times what they do is they have this evidence that they don't submit to the jury. They call it, I think it's called exculpatory. They withdraw it from the consideration of the jury, and they don't even allow it to be heard. And it could be really important information, and that information could be kept out on a technicality. But it would be important for the jury to hear it. If they could hear it, it might make up their mind about a proper decision concerning somebody's guilt or innocence. And many times juries don't have all the pieces to the puzzle, and they have quite a time trying to come to grips with what the case is about. We see it on TV all the time. And this just kind of goes to the whole discussion about vanishing points, because, again, without all the information on a particular issue, how do you have the right mind picture? And when it comes to dealing with an archangel like Lucifer, we don't have a lot of light. We're kind of like the ant trying to understand a big issue. If you think about how vast the universe is, it's really hard to get your mind around how long the life of a universe is. We think forever and ever and ever and ever, never ends. But actually, universes do come to an end. And we know that we have a hard time understanding the universe in terms of its massiveness. Before the Hubble Space Telescope was sent up, we didn't even really understand galaxies. We thought, the stars that we saw in our galaxy were all stars within our galaxy. But many of the things we saw in our galaxies were lights shining from far off distances that made their impression, it seemed, in our galaxy. But when we got the Hubble spacecraft up there and the Hubble telescope up there, we began to see that there's millions, actually billions of galaxies just like our galaxy, the Milky Way. In fact, they've charted over 900 billion galaxies. And if you stop to think that a galaxy is about 10 billion stars, you begin to go, oh my gosh, I never thought that it was that big. So up until the time of the Hubble spacecraft, we had a vanishing point. Now, with the apparatus of this technical device up there, now our concept of the universe is enormously enlarged to incorporate something way beyond what we ever thought. And I'm saying all these things, again, just to demonstrate that we only have a certain capacity to think. certain levels and degrees and lengths and widths, and those are vanishing points in us. We only have a certain ability to see backwards in history. Many of us don't even know anything about history. That's a vanishing point. So prophecies given in the Bible to expand our vision into the distance, and history is given in history books and biblical terms to help us see backwards into time. But most of us have limitations because we just don't have enough pieces of the puzzle to make an accurate picture whereby we can understand the dimensions of things. We have vanishing points.